guys, it's ASBYT and welcome back to a brand new video. Now, of course, the OnePlus 6T was launched about 3 weeks ago, so I think it's probably about that time that I do my full review. We're going to, of course, be talking design, specs, performance, and my opinions on the differences between the OnePlus 6T and, of course, the OnePlus 6. And I also possibly decided to jump into a lake for this video. Surely not. Brand new merch. Look at that. It's not bad, is it? Hi guys and welcome back to a brand new video. Like I said, today we're talking about the OnePlus 6T. It was launched on the 29th of October. It's now the 21st. If my maths serves me correct, that's just over 3 weeks. 3 weeks and my full review. I did a brief hands-on first impressions review of the OnePlus 6T on launch, but now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, the juicy-woosy, the main event. Now, word of warning, this isn't going to be mainly talking about specs today because I did that in my sort of hands-on first review. Go and see that if you're interested in that. This is more going to be on my usage since the launch. I don't even know what I'm saying, to be honest, because I'm not really speaking on the phone. Now, while this video isn't a straight comparison between the OnePlus 6 and the 6T, I will obviously be talking about both quite a fair bit because they are very similar phones. So first, let's talk design. It really is the same design language as the OnePlus 6. The only real differences are, of course, the teardrop notch right at the top there. And, of course, there is now no fingerprint scanner on the back. And that's, of course, they've made way for an in-display fingerprint sensor right on the front here. And we'll touch on that in a second. But yes, there's not really been much change design-wise, but that's not really necessarily a bad thing. You know, I really do like the design of the OnePlus 6. They're very slim and easy to use with one hand. They're not too big for this new phablet world that we live in now, and that's due to the ergonomics of the rounded back as well. Some other phones of a similar size are a lot squarer on the back, and therefore they feel a lot harder to hold. Like I said, that little curve just about makes all the difference. Now that's of course on the rear. Now on the front is a slightly different story. Although I do like it, it is edge to edge. It's very immersive. You do get the very small bezels around the outside. The chin that's been just so slightly shortened compared to the OnePlus 6. But the only real pet peeve of the front is just my personal preference, and you possibly won't agree. I do actually quite like the infinity displays of the Samsung Note 9, for example, and of course the Huawei Mate 20 Pro. Them sort of screens are my preference, but I know a lot of people that prefer flat screens, and for that reason, you may prefer the OnePlus 6T over, say, the Note 9. And, to be honest, in terms of practicality, even though the infinity displays nowadays are pretty good for the accidental touch when reaching across the screen, it still happens on occasions, which you won't generally get with a flat screen. And of course, for gaming, the flat screens generally will probably be better for you. And speaking of gaming, I've tried a few games from the Play Store, including the likes of PUBG, Fortnite, etc., and it works great. Right, so now we're going to jump onto the in-display fingerprint sensor, which we've touched on already, because it is one of the main differences. And do I like the idea? Yes, I do. Although I was more hyped for it a year or so ago when companies first started talking about putting it in devices, now it's kind of here. I'm a little bit underwhelmed, if I'm being deadly honest, but it is still a nice touch. Do I think it's quite as accurate, quite as secure, quite as quick as the original fingerprint sensor, which was of course on the back? No. I do actually think the OnePlus 6 outperforms the 6T in this area. I still find, even though I'm getting used to using it, it is still slightly unreliable. You only have to be a fraction out and it simply won't work, and then you have to redo it, and that takes time. Whereas I find, because there's a ridge on the OnePlus 6 where the fingerprint sensor is, it's a lot easier to find and unlock your phone that way. You also have the face unlock on the 6T, which I actually use probably more than the in-display fingerprint sensor, just because it's so quick. And actually, when I've gone to use the in-display fingerprint sensor, it's actually unlocked using that face unlock before I've actually gone through and used that fingerprint sensor, just because it is so rapid. Considering the sensors on the front, your face is right next to the phone anyway, it's probably easier just to use that. But do I like having options, and does it feel quite futuristic? Yeah, I suppose it does, and it does feel pretty cool. Now, one of the downsides of the 6T, because they've used the in-display fingerprint sensor and because they've added a larger battery, 3700 mAh as opposed to 3300, which we'll get to shortly, they've had to make allowances in terms of space, and they've decided to get rid of the headphone jack. Now, while I am well used to using wireless earphones now, and the loss of the headphone jack isn't such a travesty for me personally, I can understand and appreciate a lot of you guys will still want a headphone jack, and that is a big reason why you might have wanted to keep hold of or buy the OnePlus 6 instead. And I am personally a little bit surprised that OnePlus decided that the in-display fingerprint sensor was more necessary than a headphone jack, a company that generally strives for making sure that whatever they put in their phone is not there kind of as a gimmick, it's more there as a way of making the consumer's life easier. I don't feel they've quite followed through with that idea. I'm not sure the trade-off was necessary, but also because the battery life on the OnePlus 6 is already really good due to the fact that it's a 1080p AMOLED panel and not, say, a Quad HD display, and the fact that software is so well optimized. The battery life on the OnePlus 6 is already one of the best of this year. Having said that, a larger battery is of course always great. I can see why certain people would still prefer having a larger battery than a headphone jack, but vice versa as well. In using the OnePlus 6T, I can honestly say it is probably one of the best current phones for all-day battery life. I will go into far more detail with things like that in, say, my after 3 months review, just because that is something that can change over time with things like software updates, for example. On the whole, the software, very close to stock Android. Oxygen OS always has been kind of one of my favorite bits of software. I actually feel this year the implementation of Oxygen OS over the top of Android 9 Pie is probably better than Android Pie itself made by Google. I actually prefer the software on the 6T than I do the Google Pixel 3. It seems odd to say that, I just love the way that OnePlus do gestures, very fluid, it's very quick, and it feels very close to how Apple have implemented gestures into their iOS. And that's not to say that Apple phones are better than Android phones, because generally I use Android, but that is one area that I think Apple have been ahead of Android. It is what it is, my opinion, you may not agree. Bitterly cold out here. I'm basically sat on a lake in the winter to record videos for you guys. You want me to jump in the lake, don't you? I know what you're like. Come on then, let's go. No! If this video gets 10,000 likes, I'll jump in that lake next time. I won't. I might. We'll never get to 10,000, it's fine. 10,000 likes, next OnePlus video, I'll jump in the lake. Can't say fairer than that. It's just absolutely stupid. It doesn't matter if we're never going to get there. What happens if it does? Now, one thing that I do often mention in these sort of in-depth reviews is certain products and glitches and things like that. Now, I can honestly say that OnePlus 6T I haven't really experienced, I don't think really any other than one, and it's not really that bad. It's just I've noticed on YouTube when you pinch to zoom sometimes, I get kind of a little flicker. It's hard to explain, but it doesn't always zoom smoothly. Is that a massive nitpick in terms of glitching? Yeah. Now we're going to talk the speaker, and it's the same as the OnePlus 6. There is no difference, and my personal opinion on the OnePlus 6 speaker was the fact that it was okay, it wasn't great, it didn't suck. But the one biggest problem was the audio volume between 0 and halfway, and that kind of still rings true with the 6T. I find it very strange how you almost get no volume whatsoever when raising the volume from nothing until you get to halfway, and then it really kicks in. It's a bit odd, but it is what it is, and that's the same again in the 6T. Whether they can change anything with software updates, I'm not sure. I think they probably would have done it already, because the 6 has had sort of audio improvements with their software updates, and while it's improved it a bit, it's still not great, and the 6T is exactly the same. Now, the 6T's camera on paper is pretty much identical to the 6. The main differences have of course come in the software department. We now have two main things. We have nightscape and we have studio lighting. Studio lighting was the one. That's good memory. And we'll talk briefly about those two in a second, but as you would expect from the fact that the cameras on paper are pretty much the same as the phone that came before, the differences are very minimal. Great camera, especially for the money, but minimal difference between the two. So what are the photos like with the 6T? Really impressive HDR. You can get some great shots when the sky, for example, is really bright, but you've got darker areas as well. You get good detail in those darker areas without overexposing that sky backdrop. Color accurate while still popping in certain areas like plant life, for example, but not too over the top and saturated like we've seen from some of the sort of very heavily AI pushed camera smartphones. Pictures often come out very sharp, great detail, perhaps not, don't know what that noise was, perhaps not quite at the same level as the Pixel 3, for example, or the Huawei Mate 20 Pro, but again, considering the price, it does a remarkable job. So let's talk Nightscape. This is the brand new night mode, which you can of course now get to by scrolling across to, as you can see, night mode right there, and you can see me. Hello. Sorry about that. So there you see me on the camera, and there you see me in real life. Ghastly in both. That's how accurate the camera is. It picks up just how ugly I am. Although, of course, another little plug, you can see the merch there, flashing it. So it is nice to have a specific mode dedicated to night shots. And on the whole, again, I'm quite impressed with Nightscape. Low light performance is certainly an improvement on the 6T. And while, yes, it's not night and day, night mode, I am on fire. Oh no, it wasn't good. Yeah, while the mode is better for night shots, I believe Nightscape is also coming to the OnePlus 6 as well in a software update, so not necessarily a massive advantage on the 6T. Now, one software tweak to the camera which isn't, I believe, coming to the OnePlus 6 is, of course, studio lighting, like we mentioned, and this is meant to improve portrait modes, for example, and while I think progressively as software updates have come to the OnePlus 6 and the 6T, the camera has been improving all the time, especially in those portrait shots, and you can get some really great portrait selfies, for example. Lovely blur in the background, edge detection, even though it's software based, is pretty accurate, but again, is it a massive difference? No, it is very minimal, but many people might be shouting at the camera now saying, the camera? At the screen. The T variant is always a minimal upgrade anyway. I just don't really know what I'm doing, leaning on a bench in the middle of a park. What are you doing? So overall, most shots come out pretty nice indeed. And yeah, I feel the camera on the OnePlus 6T is the best in this price range for a smartphone. Now, in terms of video, again, same sentiment as the OnePlus 6. Rear camera tops out at 4K at 60, which is still very impressive, especially when some more expensive smartphones only top out at 4K at 30 frames a second. Obviously, the lower down the resolution you go, the better the video stabilization will become. So 4K at 30, 1080p, for example, will usually perform better than 4K at 60. Just gonna go for a little run. I say a run, it's more of a jaunt, if that's a word you can use. It's a jaunt, it's a jog, one of the two. He's off. Just stop, spin it round. Oh yeah, lovely. Now we're just going to switch to the front-facing camera. That tops out at 1080p. So yeah, so we're now filming in 1080p on the front-facing camera here. As you can see, wonderful scenery. Look at that beautiful lake there. There's also, you probably saw some of the photos earlier, some of the reindeer. They're not reindeers, are they? But yes, you get a rough idea of what it's going to look like. Again, let me know about the stabilization, what you think of that, and the picture quality as well. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about the two setups, including video quality, audio, and stabilization. My only one criticism of the 6T in terms of video recording is sometimes I find, especially if you were filming, say, a talking head or a person, a talking head. If you were filming somebody and they were moving, talking, etc., I sometimes find it likes to exposure hunt, and that can be a bit interesting, especially if you are editing. But again, it's kind of nitpicking in terms of what most people would use a video camera for on a smartphone. Now, this is a very important question that I've got for you guys. What do you think about the OnePlus 6T? Is it an upgrade over the OnePlus 6, or do you see them both being pretty much the same, or do you indeed see it as a downgrade? As always, I'd love to hear all of your thoughts, and remember, if this video, which is never going to happen, if this video gets 10,000 likes, I will jump in that lake for a future OnePlus video. Just don't like the video. I don't want to jump in a lake. Especially considering it's coming round to winter. What was I thinking? Drop a dislike on the video. Subscribe and hit that notification bell if you are new to the channel and want to be notified every time I post a video on anything tech, pretty much daily content on YouTube. I love you and leave you. I'll see you in the next one. ASBYT, peace out.